Rancher found an Apache woman in his bed, and his life changed forever. The smell of hay, the sound of cattle lowing in the distance, and the creak of the wooden fences were constants in his life. He liked the rhythm of it, the way every day felt the same yet somehow comforting. The mornings were cold, the evenings were warm, and the stars at night seemed brighter when there was no one else around to notice them. Despite the peacefulness, James often felt a quiet emptiness. He didn't have a family, and most of his friends lived miles away in the nearest small town. He had grown up on this land, inheriting the ranch from his father, who had taught him everything about caring for the cattle, mending fences, and riding horses. James loved his father, but when his father passed away, James was left alone with only the land for company. He had thought he wanted a life of solitude, but sometimes, as he sat alone by the fire at night, he wondered if something important was missing. One night after a heavy rainstorm, James slept deeply, wrapped in his worn quilt. The rain had soaked the ground, and the wind had howled across the plains, rattling the windows. He was exhausted, and the storm had left him feeling both tired and oddly peaceful. As he stirred in the middle of the night, he felt something unusual, a strange warmth on the edge of his bed. For a moment, he thought it was a dream, but when he opened his eyes, he was shocked to see a woman lying there. She was not someone he knew, and yet she seemed calm despite the rain-soaked appearance of her clothes. Her dark hair clung to her face, and her eyes, wide and cautious, looked directly at him. James froze, unsure of what to do. His mind raced. Who was she? How had she gotten into his home? For a moment, fear gripped him, but then something in her expression softened him. She did not seem dangerous. She seemed lost, tired, and frightened. James took a careful step closer. Who are you?" he asked, his voice quiet so as not to startle her. "My name is Aeon," she whispered, her voice soft but steady. "I needed shelter. I had nowhere else to go." James blinked. He had never heard a name like that before. Something about the way she spoke, the way her eyes held both strength and vulnerability, made him pause. He didn't know whether to be afraid or to offer help. He had always been taught to be cautious of strangers, especially those who appeared out of nowhere in the middle of the night. But something inside him urged him to act differently this time. He walked back to the small dresser in his room and pulled out a spare blanket. Gently, he draped it over her shoulders. "You should get warm," he said. "It's been a rough night." Aeon nodded, shivering slightly. James noticed that her hands were calloused, like someone who had worked hard with them. Her clothes were worn, patched in several places, but clean enough to show that she cared about herself. He realized that she must have traveled a long way to be here. "Where are you from?" James asked cautiously. Aeon hesitated. For a moment her gaze drifted to the window where the storm had left puddles reflecting the moonlight. "I come from the Apache tribe," she said softly. "I had to leave. My life, it was in danger." James felt a chill, not from the cold but from the weight of her words. Danger. He had never faced anything like that on his ranch. The most trouble he had ever encountered was a sick calf or a broken fence. But hearing that she had fled from danger, that she had risked everything to find safety, made him feel something he hadn't felt in years. Concern for another person, a need to protect. He didn't know why, but he offered her some water from the jug on his nightstand. She accepted it with a quiet thank you, her eyes briefly meeting his before she turned away. There was a sadness in her, a story in her silence that he could not yet understand. James didn't press her for more answers. Some things, he thought, had to be shared in their own time. The rest of the night passed quietly. James sat by the small fire in the corner of the room, keeping watch as Aeon slept, occasionally adjusting the blanket around her shoulders. He couldn't help but think about how strange this night was, how a simple rancher's life had been interrupted in the most unexpected way. He had always dreamed of adventure, of something that would change the quiet monotony of his days, but he had never imagined it would arrive like this, in the form of a mysterious woman appearing in his bed. When the first rays of sunlight began to peek over the horizon, James stirred. Aeon was awake now, sitting quietly on the edge of the bed, her hands wrapped around her knees. She looked out the window at the damp, sparkling plains. "Thank you," she said softly. "For letting me stay." James nodded, unsure what else to say. "You're welcome," he replied. He realized that this moment, this encounter, was the beginning of something neither of them could predict. It was more than a night of shelter. It was the start of a connection that would change his life in ways he could not yet imagine. As she stood to leave the room and stretch her stiff limbs, James felt a mixture of curiosity and unease. Who was she really? Why had she come here? And how much would this mysterious presence alter the life he had carefully built for himself? He didn't know the answers, but for the first time in years, he felt a spark of excitement. A sense that life might be about to become something more than the routine he had always accepted. James went outside to inspect the ranch after breakfast, keeping an eye out for any sign of trouble. The storm had left the earth muddy, the grass glistening with droplets, and the air crisp and fresh. He rode his horse across the fields, thinking about Aeon and the story she had only just begun to tell. He didn't know yet how her presence would impact him, but he felt a deep certainty that it would. Something had shifted in his life overnight, and he could feel the world around him opening in ways he hadn't expected. By the time the sun was high in the sky, James returned to the house. Aeon was sitting on the porch, quietly watching the horizon. She looked stronger than she had the night before, though there was still a hint of vulnerability in her eyes. James knew that the days ahead would be challenging, not because of the ranch or the work, but because of the story that had begun between them, a story of survival, trust, and an unexpected bond that neither of them could yet fully understand. As he fed the horses and repaired a broken fence post, James couldn't stop thinking about how one night could change a man's life so profoundly. The quiet rancher who had known nothing but routine was now part of a story bigger than himself. And even though he didn't yet know the outcome, he felt ready to face it. He had a feeling that life, in all its unpredictable twists, was about to teach him lessons he would never forget. Aeon's presence on the ranch quickly began to feel like a quiet storm in James's life. She had spent the night safely in his home, but the morning brought questions he could not ignore. Who was she really? Why had she come to him? And most importantly, how had she survived on her own out there in the wild? James had always considered himself self-reliant, able to face the harsh realities of ranch life alone, but Aeon seemed to have experienced hardships far beyond anything he had ever imagined. That morning, as the sun climbed higher in the sky, James found her sitting on the porch, her gaze fixed on the distant hills. She was quiet, almost reflective, and James felt a mixture of curiosity and concern. He decided to approach her slowly, wanting to speak gently so as not to startle her. "Aeon," he said, his voice calm, "you don't have to explain anything right now if you don't want to, but if you're ready to talk, I want to listen." Aeon turned her eyes toward him, and for a moment James could see the shadows of fear and sorrow that had haunted her. Then, as if deciding he could be trusted, she began to speak. Her voice was soft but steady, carrying the weight of experience far beyond her years. "I come from a place called the Apache lands," she began. "I lived with my family and my people there. Life was simple, but it was not safe. People wanted to take what was ours. They wanted to take my home, my family, me. One night I had to run. I had no choice." James listened carefully, trying to imagine what it would mean to have to leave everything behind, to run without knowing where safety could be found. He had faced storms and hardships on the ranch, but nothing compared to the courage it must have taken for Aeon to survive alone in the wilderness. Her story was filled with moments of danger, wild animals that stalked her in the night, rough terrain that tore at her feet, hunger that gnawed at her strength. She spoke with a quiet dignity, never complaining, only telling the truth of what she had endured. I traveled for days, maybe weeks, Aeon continued, sleeping wherever I could, finding water in streams, food from the land. I tried to stay hidden. I couldn't risk being found. I didn't know who would help me or who would hurt me. And then I found your house. James felt a mixture of awe and disbelief. He had never imagined that his quiet, solitary home could be the sanctuary someone had searched for so desperately. He thought about the long nights he had spent alone, the empty walls, the silence that sometimes felt oppressive. Now that silence was broken by Aeon's presence, but it was broken in a way that brought life and meaning rather than fear. Over the next few days, James tried to make her feel safe. He gave her clean clothes, warm food, and a place to rest. He asked about her journey, but Aeon spoke only as much as she felt comfortable sharing. She had learned to survive through caution, and trusting someone completely was not easy. Yet with each passing day, James noticed subtle signs of trust, how she relaxed when he was near, how she smiled faintly when he told stories of his father and the ranch, and how she began to help with small chores, her movements careful but confident. James began to realize that Aeon was more than just a survivor. She was remarkably skilled. She knew which plants could be used for medicine, how to track animals, and how to move quietly across the land. He watched her tend to a small patch of herbs by the kitchen garden, impressed by her knowledge. For the first time, James felt that he had something to learn, something beyond ranching or tools or animals. He had lived his entire life in a bubble, thinking he understood the world, but Aeon's presence made him see how much he had yet to discover. One afternoon, as they worked side by side repairing a broken fence, Aeon paused and looked at him with serious eyes. "James," she said, "I didn't come here to cause trouble. I just needed a place to be safe. But I also want to learn. I want to understand this world beyond the lands I knew." James nodded, feeling a deep respect for her courage and humility. "You've already taught me more than you know," he replied. "Sometimes we think we know everything about life, but the truth is, every person we meet has something to teach us." Their days fell into a rhythm. Aeon would rise early to help with feeding the animals, then spend hours learning from James about the ranch, the land, and the routines he had followed for years. In turn, she would show him the ways of her people, how to recognize tracks in the dirt, how to make simple remedies from plants, and how to move silently across the plains. Each skill, each shared story, deepened the bond between them. James began to feel a connection he had never felt with anyone before, a mixture of admiration, trust, and something gentler, something that touched the heart. But it wasn't always easy. Aeon's presence brought challenges as well. Some of James's neighbors noticed the stranger on his property and whispered about it in the small town nearby. Rumors began to spread, and James felt a mixture of frustration and concern. He had always valued his privacy, and now he had to consider not only his own life, but also the safety and comfort of someone who depended on him. The thought of letting harm come to Aeon because of careless gossip filled him with anger he had rarely experienced. Despite the tension, there were moments of peace that made every worry worthwhile. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the mountains, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, James and Aeon sat on the porch, watching the cattle grazing in the golden light. Aeon leaned back, her eyes thoughtful. "I never imagined a place like this could exist," she said softly. "It feels safe. It feels like home, even though it's not where I came from." James felt a lump in his throat. "Home isn't just a place," he replied. "It's where you feel you belong. I think maybe we're finding that together." The weeks passed and Aeon began to thrive on the ranch. She no longer appeared as someone merely fleeing danger. She became a part of the land, moving with ease across the fields, tending to the animals, and even joining James in planning the work that needed to be done. He noticed how she laughed at small things, how her eyes sparkled with life, and how her presence seemed to fill the spaces that had once felt empty in his home. At night, after the work was done and the fire was lit, they would sit together in silence or exchange stories about their lives. Aeon shared memories of her tribe, of the lessons taught by elders, and the songs sung around campfires. James shared tales of his father, of the ranch's history, and of his dreams for the future. Each story created a bridge between them, a connection built on respect, curiosity, and shared experience. But even as trust grew, there remained questions unspoken. Aeon had fled danger, but James knew that threats could still exist. He worried for her safety, aware that some dangers were invisible, waiting beyond the horizon or in the shadows of the past. And Aeon, despite her growing comfort, could not completely forget the life she had left behind. The memory of family, of her tribe, and of the world that had once been hers lingered in her mind, a reminder that safety was never guaranteed. One evening, as they watched the stars appear, Aeon spoke quietly. "James, I don't want to be a burden. I don't want you to feel trapped because I'm here." James shook his head firmly. "You're not a burden, not for a second. Life brought you here for a reason, and I want to help. I want to be part of your journey, just as you've become part of mine." Aeon smiled faintly, a mixture of relief and gratitude in her eyes. For the first time, she felt a glimmer of hope, a belief that perhaps life could be different, safer, fuller, and richer than she had dared to imagine. And James, too, felt something he had not known in years, a sense of purpose, a reason to care for someone deeply, beyond routine, beyond the land, beyond himself. The days turned into weeks, and with each passing moment, their connection strengthened. The ranch, once a place of solitary work, became a place of shared life. The cattle, the fences, the fields, all were now part of a story that included both James and Aeon. And as they worked, laughed, and learned together, James began to understand that the world had opened up to him in a way he could never have predicted. Life had delivered him a chance not just for companionship, but for transformation. By the time the sun rose high in the sky on another bright morning, James knew one thing with certainty. His life had already begun to change. Aeon's presence had brought a new dimension to his existence, a reminder that life was never truly complete until it was shared, and that courage, trust, and connection could transform even the quietest, most routine life into something extraordinary. Life on the ranch had begun to feel different for James. What had once been a quiet, predictable routine now carried a new energy brought by Aeon's presence. The days were still filled with hard work, feeding the cattle, repairing fences, and managing the land. But now there was conversation, laughter, and a shared sense of purpose. Yet beneath the surface, James felt a storm of emotions he did not fully understand. He had grown to care deeply for Aeon, but he also sensed the fragility of her trust. One wrong word, one careless action, could shatter the delicate bond they were building. Aeon, for her part, was adjusting to life on the ranch, but it was not easy. She was strong and resourceful, having survived countless dangers in the wild, but learning to live in a new world required patience, humility, and trust. Some nights she would stare out over the open fields, remembering the land and people she had left behind. Even as she began to feel safe with James, the memories of her past, of fear, loss, and survival, never fully disappeared. She was haunted by questions. Could she ever truly belong in this new place? Could she trust someone again after all she had endured? One afternoon, while checking on a section of fence that had been damaged in a recent storm, James noticed Aeon moving with unusual tension. She paused mid-step, her eyes scanning the distant hills, and then turned to him. "James," she said quietly, "I need to tell you more about my past. I think it's time you know." James nodded. He had known that there were parts of her story she had not yet shared, and he had waited patiently, respecting her boundaries. Now, sensing her readiness, he gave her his full attention. "I'm listening," he said, his voice calm and reassuring. Aeon took a deep breath. "Before I came here, I lived with my family in the Apache lands. My parents, my brothers and sisters, my elders, they were my world. But there were always people who wanted to take our land, our traditions, everything we held dear. One night when I was still young, our home was attacked. I ran for my life while others tried to fight back. I thought I might never see my family again. Her voice trembled slightly, and James could see the weight of the memories pressing on her. I survived by hiding, moving quietly through the forests and mountains, and learning to trust the land instead of people. Every day was a struggle, every night a test of courage. Sometimes I went hungry. Sometimes I was so tired I thought I could not go on. But I kept moving because I had no other choice. I had to survive. James listened in silence, feeling a mixture of awe and sorrow. He had known hardship in his life, but Aeon's story revealed a world of danger and resilience he had never imagined. He realized that her strength was not just physical, it was a courage of the heart, a determination to keep going when hope seemed distant. Over the next few days, their relationship deepened further. They worked side by side on the ranch, each learning from the other. James taught Aeon how to mend fences properly, how to care for sick animals, and how to predict the weather by observing the sky and the wind. Aeon in turn shared her knowledge of the land, how to find water in unexpected places, which plants could heal wounds, and how to move quietly and cautiously across the terrain. Their lessons were not just practical, they were also lessons in trust, patience, and understanding. Despite the growing closeness, James found himself struggling with emotions he could not fully name. He admired Aeon's bravery and resilience, but he also felt a pull in his heart that he had never experienced before. It was a mixture of affection, respect, and a longing he could not fully articulate. He tried to focus on the work, on the ranch, on the simple routines that had once defined his life, but Aeon's presence made it impossible to ignore the feelings growing within him. Aeon, too, felt a connection she had not expected. She had survived countless hardships alone, and yet now she found herself relying on James, trusting him in ways she had not trusted anyone in years. She felt safe with him, and yet she remained cautious, aware that her past had taught her the world could be cruel and unpredictable. She did not want to give her heart too easily, yet she could not deny the warmth and companionship she felt in his presence. One evening, as the sun dipped low behind the mountains, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple, they sat together on the porch, exhausted from a long day of work. The air was warm, the sounds of the cattle lowing in the distance, and the wind rustling through the grass felt comforting. Aeon turned to James, her expression thoughtful. "Do you ever feel like life could change in a single moment?" she asked quietly. James looked at her, sensing the depth of the question. "All the time," he replied. "I used to think I understood my life, but then you came. Everything feels different now." Aeon nodded, her eyes reflecting the colors of the sunset. "I feel the same. My life was full of fear and survival. Now, I feel like I might actually have a chance to live, not just survive." Their conversation lingered in the air, unspoken words filling the silence between them. They were both aware of the connection growing, the trust deepening, and the unspoken emotions neither wanted to confront fully yet. The ranch, the land, and the work had become a backdrop to something larger, a story of trust, courage, and hearts learning to open again. But life, as it often does, had a way of testing even the strongest bonds. One morning, while James was tending to the cattle, he noticed a small group of strangers in the distance. They were moving quickly, their expressions tense, scanning the landscape as if searching for something or someone. A sinking feeling settled in his chest. He recognized the danger immediately. Aeon's past was not entirely behind her. Someone had followed her, or perhaps news of her escape had reached people who would not leave her in peace. When he informed Aeon, her face paled, but her eyes held a fierce determination. "I knew this could happen," she said quietly. "I knew danger might follow me. But we will face it, together." James felt a surge of protectiveness. He realized that his feelings for Aeon were no longer just admiration or friendship, they were something deeper. He wanted to protect her, not out of obligation, but because he cared for her deeply. He also understood that trust and courage would be needed more than ever in the coming days. The next few days were tense. James and Aeon prepared the ranch, securing doors, checking fences, and keeping a careful watch over the land. They practiced moving quietly and alertly, using the skills Aeon had taught him. Each day was a reminder that life could change in an instant, that safety was never guaranteed, and that their connection had to be strong enough to endure any challenge. Through it all, their bond grew stronger. They relied on each other not only for protection but also for emotional support. When fears arose, they shared them. When hope appeared, they celebrated it together. James began to see that true courage was not just facing danger. It was trusting someone with your heart, even when the world seemed uncertain. Aeon began to understand that safety and trust could exist in unexpected places, and that companionship could be a source of strength rather than weakness. One evening, after a particularly long day of work and preparation, they sat by the fire outside the house. The stars shone brightly above, and the quiet of the night felt almost sacred. Aeon spoke softly, her eyes reflecting the flames. "James, I have faced so much alone. I never imagined I could feel this peace, this safety. But being here with you, I feel like I might have a future." James took her hand gently, feeling the warmth and the reality of her words. "Aeon," he said, his voice steady, "we will face whatever comes together. You are not alone anymore. And I am grateful that you are here, that you trusted me, that we found each other." In that moment, the ranch no longer felt like a place of solitude. It had become a sanctuary, a place where two lives, shaped by hardship and courage, were beginning to merge into something meaningful. The work, the land, the animals, all were now intertwined with their story, a story that was still unfolding, full of challenges, trust, and unspoken feelings that would eventually have to be acknowledged. As they sat together under the vast night sky, James realized that life was no longer predictable or simple. It was richer, fuller, and more complex than he had ever imagined. Aeon had brought into his life not just companionship, but perspective, courage, and a reminder that even in the quietest, most routine existence, extraordinary change could arrive at any moment. And Aeon, looking at James, understood that trust and hope could be found in the most unexpected places. She had survived alone for so long, but now she had discovered that life could be shared, and that shared life could be more powerful than survival alone. They did not know what the future held, but for the first time in years, both felt a sense of anticipation rather than fear. Life had changed, and neither would ever be the same again. Together, they were preparing for whatever challenges might come, knowing that their bond had the strength to face even the unknown. Life on the ranch had settled into a rhythm that was both comforting and tense. James and Aeon had grown closer, learning to rely on each other, sharing work, stories, and quiet moments of companionship. Yet beneath the calm, a sense of unease lingered. Aeon's past was never far behind, and James could feel that danger was approaching. He had always trusted his instincts, and something in the air, perhaps the behavior of the animals, perhaps the distant shadows on the horizon, told him that their peace would soon be tested. One morning, as James was checking the far end of the pasture, he spotted unfamiliar figures moving among the hills. His heart sank. They were not farmers or travelers. Their movements were purposeful, deliberate, and watchful. James knew immediately that these were people searching for Aeon. He hurried back to the house, his mind racing. Aeon was tending to the animals near the barn, unaware of the threat closing in. "Aeon," he called, his voice urgent. She turned, sensing the tension in his tone. James grabbed her arm gently, leading her inside the house. "There are people looking for you," he said, his voice low but firm. "We need to be careful." Aeon's eyes darkened, but she did not panic. She had faced danger before, and the calm determination in her gaze reminded James of just how resilient she was. "I feared this day might come," she said quietly. "We will face it together." They spent the day preparing the ranch. Windows were secured, doors checked, and escape routes quietly discussed. James realized that his knowledge of the land, combined with Aeon's understanding of survival and tracking, gave them a unique advantage. They worked together seamlessly, each action deliberate and efficient. While the sun cast long shadows over the fields, the ranch that had once been a place of quiet work now became a fortress of strategy and vigilance. As night fell, the tension grew heavier. Every sound, the rustling of the wind, the low call of a coyote, the distant creak of a tree, made James and Aeon alert. They knew the intruders could arrive at any moment and they had to be ready. Sitting together by the fire, Aeon leaned closer to James. "I have faced many dangers alone," she said softly, "but I have never had someone to face them with. I am glad it is you." James felt a surge of emotion. Her words confirmed what he had begun to understand about his feelings. He did not want to face this danger alone either. He wanted to protect her, not just because of loyalty, but because he cared for her deeply. "We will be okay," he said firmly, though inside, he felt the weight of uncertainty pressing down on him. The next morning, the intruders arrived. They were a small group, but their presence was intimidating. They moved through the fields with confidence, clearly searching for someone. James and Aeon stayed hidden, using the techniques she had taught him, moving quietly, observing patterns and staying one step ahead. It was a tense game of patience and strategy. Every heartbeat seemed amplified in the stillness of the ranch, every shadow a potential threat. Hours passed, and the intruders grew frustrated. They did not know the land as James and Aeon did. They could not anticipate the natural hiding spots, the twists of terrain, or the subtle signs that warned of nearby movement. Slowly, they began to move away, realizing that the person they sought was not easily found. After the danger passed, James and Aeon emerged from their hiding spots. Relief washed over them, but it was tempered by the realization that safety was never guaranteed. They had survived this encounter, but the experience left both of them with a deeper understanding of the risks that still lingered. James looked at Aeon, admiration and concern mixing in his gaze. "You are incredible," he said softly. "I don't know how you survived all of this on your own before." Aeon shook her head. "I survived because I had to. Life left me no choice, but now I feel stronger knowing I am not alone." In the following days, they began to repair the subtle damages caused by the intruders' presence. Fence posts had been disturbed, the horses had been unsettled, and the sense of safety had been temporarily shattered. But the experience also strengthened their bond. They had faced danger together, and that shared challenge created a trust and connection deeper than words could express. As they worked, James found himself reflecting on how much his life had changed since Aeon had arrived. The quiet rancher who had once spent his days alone, dreaming of a life of simple routine, now found purpose in protecting, caring for, and learning from someone else. Aeon had brought more than companionship. She had brought meaning, challenge, and a sense of adventure that he had never experienced before. Aeon, too, felt a transformation. She had been shaped by hardship and survival, but James had shown her that life could be lived differently, that it was possible to find safety, trust, and even joy in unexpected places. She began to see the ranch not just as a refuge, but as a home, a place where she could heal, grow, and build a future. One evening, as the sun set over the plains, casting a golden glow across the fields, they sat together on the porch. The animals were quiet, the wind gentle, and the sky stretched endlessly above. Aeon spoke softly, her voice carrying both reflection and determination. "James, we have faced danger and uncertainty, but we survived. And I have learned something important. Strength is not just about surviving alone. It is about trusting someone, sharing the burden, and moving forward together. James nodded, feeling the weight and truth of her words. I have learned the same, he said. I thought I could handle everything on my own, but you've shown me that life is richer, fuller, and stronger when shared with someone you trust. The weeks that followed were filled with quiet rebuilding and preparation. They reinforced fences, tended to the animals, and worked the fields together. Each task, no matter how small, became a shared experience, a testament to their growing partnership. Aeon's knowledge of the land complemented James's experience, creating a team that was resilient, capable, and united. Yet even in this routine, tension lingered. The threat of danger was never far from their minds. James knew that the world beyond the ranch could be harsh, unpredictable, and sometimes cruel. But he also knew that with Aeon by his side, they could face whatever challenges came their way. Her courage, resilience, and resourcefulness had already proven invaluable. Together, they were stronger than they had ever been alone. One morning, as they worked to repair a section of fence that had been damaged by the recent storm, Aeon paused and looked at James seriously. "James, I need you to know something," she said. "Life is unpredictable. Danger can come when we least expect it, but I am ready to face it as long as we face it together." James felt a lump in his throat. Her words echoed the truth he had been feeling for weeks. "We will face it together," he replied firmly. "No matter what comes, we will be there for each other." As they continued their work, a sense of calm returned to the ranch, but it was now mixed with vigilance. They moved with awareness, alert to every sound, every shadow, every subtle change in the environment. Their bond had been tested by danger, strengthened by trust, and now it was fortified by mutual understanding and respect. That evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, James and Aeon sat together on the porch, watching the sky turn from gold to deep indigo. The stars appeared one by one, brilliant and steady, a reminder of the vast world beyond the ranch. Aeon rested her head on James's shoulder, and for the first time in a long time, both felt a profound sense of peace. They had survived the threats, strengthened their bond, and discovered the power of trust and companionship. James realized that life had changed in ways he could never have anticipated. The ranch was no longer just a place of work. It was a home, a sanctuary, and the center of a story that had grown far beyond his own life. Aeon had not only survived the dangers of the past, but she had also transformed the quiet, predictable life he had once known into something vibrant, meaningful, and full of potential. And Aeon, looking out over the fields, understood that she had found something she had never expected, a place where she could heal, grow, and belong. With James, she had discovered that life could be more than survival. It could be shared, cherished, and strengthened through trust, courage, and love. Together, they faced the unknown with determination and hope, knowing that their partnership, tested by danger and strengthened by trust, would guide them through whatever challenges lay ahead. The ranch had become more than a home. It was a symbol of their resilience, their courage, and the extraordinary bond that had grown between them. The days after the danger had passed were different for James and Aeon. The fear that had once shadowed their lives was replaced by a cautious sense of freedom, a realization that they had survived not just because of skill and planning, but because of the bond they shared. The ranch, once a quiet place of routine, now felt alive with possibility. Every sound, every movement, every interaction between them carried the weight of shared experiences and the promise of a future they were building together. James woke early that morning, as he always did, to the soft light of dawn spilling across the fields. The horses stirred quietly, the wind carried the familiar scent of the earth, and the sky glowed with the soft colors of a new day. He glanced at the small cabin where Aeon slept, wondering if she was awake yet, and found himself smiling at the thought of her presence in his life. It was a smile born not just of affection, but of profound gratitude. Gratitude for the unexpected turn his life had taken, for the courage she had shown, and for the quiet transformation she had inspired in him. Aeon emerged shortly after, her dark hair catching the sunlight, her eyes alert and focused. She moved with the ease and grace of someone deeply connected to the land, yet there was a softness now that had not been there before, a peace that came from knowing she was safe, that she belonged. "Good morning, James," she said, her voice carrying warmth and calm. "Good morning," he replied, handing her a cup of coffee. "Sleep well," she nodded. "Better than I have in a long time." Their mornings began to blend work and conversation. Together, they tended to the animals, repaired fences, and walked the land, speaking in quiet tones about dreams, plans, and the lessons life had taught them. Aeon shared stories of her people, of their traditions, songs, and the wisdom passed down through generations. James listened, fascinated by her knowledge and the depth of her experience. He realized that her stories were not just tales of survival, they were lessons in resilience, courage, and the power of community. In turn, James shared his life, the history of the ranch, the stories of his father, and the routines that had once defined him. Aeon listened with genuine interest, asking questions, learning the names of the fields, the habits of the animals, and the rhythms of ranch life. Together, they discovered a shared respect for the land and the value of hard work, realizing that their skills complemented one another in ways that made them stronger together. As the weeks turned into months, their partnership deepened. It was no longer just about survival. It was about creating a life that was full, meaningful, and shared. They began to plan small improvements for the ranch, thinking ahead to seasons, planting new crops and organizing spaces for the animals. Aeon's perspective brought innovation, while James's experience ensured practicality. Together, they envisioned a future that was brighter and more secure than either had dared to imagine alone. Beyond the work, a quiet emotional bond was growing. They shared laughter over small moments, comforted each other when exhaustion or frustration threatened to take hold, and found joy in the simplest experiences. A warm meal, a sunset over the plains, the soft sound of horses grazing nearby. For the first time in years, James felt a sense of contentment that had nothing to do with routine or solitude. It was rooted in connection, trust, and shared purpose. Aeon, too, felt a sense of belonging she had never known, a recognition that safety and happiness could exist when built together. One evening, as the sky blazed with the colors of sunset, they sat on the porch together, quietly observing the cattle grazing in the golden light. Aeon leaned against James, her hand resting gently on his. "Do you ever think about what life would be like if we hadn't met?" she asked softly. James thought for a moment. "I don't want to imagine it," he said honestly. "I would have continued with my quiet life, and I would have missed so much. You've changed everything for me, not just the way I live, but the way I see the world, the way I feel about life, about trust, about love." Aeon smiled faintly, her eyes reflecting both emotion and gratitude. "I feel the same. I thought I could only survive alone, that trusting someone was too dangerous. But now I feel like I can live, really live. And it's because of you, James, because of us." Their conversation was quiet, but powerful. It was a moment of realization that their bond was not just about companionship or safety, it was about transformation. Both had been changed by the experiences they shared, by the courage required to face danger, and by the trust and support they had offered one another. The ranch was no longer just land. It was a symbol of their journey, their survival, and the extraordinary connection they had formed. As the months passed, life on the ranch continued to flourish. The animals were healthy, the land productive, and the routines that once seemed mundane were now infused with meaning. James and Aeon worked seamlessly as a team, their partnership strengthened by every challenge overcome and every shared moment of joy. Their bond was evident in the small gestures, the way they looked out for each other, the silent communication in their work, and the warmth of their companionship in moments of quiet reflection. Aeon also began to reconnect with her heritage in new ways. James encouraged her to share her traditions, teaching him the songs, stories, and practices of her people. Together, they built a life that honored both the past and the present, creating a bridge between her culture and the world they now shared. James discovered that the land itself could carry new meaning when approached with respect, understanding, and a willingness to learn from someone whose experience was different from his own. One day, while tending to the fields, James realized something profound. Life had brought him a series of unexpected events: the appearance of Aeon, the challenges they had faced together, and the transformation of the ranch into a home filled with life and purpose. He understood that true change often came in ways one could not predict, and that the courage to embrace it, the willingness to trust, and the strength to face the unknown were what shaped a life worth living. Aeon felt the same. She had come to the ranch seeking safety, but she found far more. She found trust, companionship, and a sense of belonging she had long thought impossible. She understood that life could be both fragile and beautiful, that danger could coexist with hope, and that the bonds formed through shared struggle were among the strongest a person could ever experience. As the seasons changed, their life together became a blend of work, learning, and quiet joy. Winter brought the challenge of storms and cold nights, but it also brought moments of closeness, sitting by the fire, sharing stories, and planning for the spring. Spring brought growth, new life on the ranch, and a sense of renewal. Each season was a testament to their resilience, their cooperation, and the strength of their bond. James and Aeon also began to envision a future beyond the immediate demands of the ranch. They spoke quietly of building a family, of welcoming others into their home, and of creating a life that honored both the land and the people who mattered to them. Their dreams were grounded in reality, but carried the hope and excitement of possibility. One evening, under a sky filled with stars, Aeon looked at James with a mixture of emotion and certainty. "James, everything in my life has led me here, to this moment, to this place, and to you. I have faced so much, but I have never felt more alive, more safe, or more hopeful than I do now. I want to live the rest of my life with you, building, learning, and facing whatever comes, together." James felt a deep warmth in his chest, a feeling that words could not fully capture. He had known solitude, routine, and quiet longing, but now he understood what it meant to share life fully with another person. "Aeon," he said, taking her hands in his, "you have changed my life in ways I could never have imagined. I want the same. I want to face everything with you, to build a life together, and to never let fear or doubt keep us from living fully." In that moment, the ranch no longer felt like just land, animals, and work. It was a home, a sanctuary, and a symbol of everything they had endured and achieved together. The hardships of the past had strengthened their bond, the dangers they faced had built trust, and the everyday moments had created a foundation for love, respect, and partnership. Life on the ranch continued, rich and full, filled with laughter, learning, and the quiet satisfaction of shared purpose. James and Aeon had faced uncertainty, danger, and the unknown, and they had emerged stronger, closer, and transformed. Their story was no longer one of survival alone, but of living together with trust, courage, and hope. And as the sun rose each day over the vast plains, James and Aeon faced the future with confidence, knowing that together, they could endure anything, create something beautiful, and continue a journey that had begun with an unexpected encounter, but had grown into a life full of meaning, love, and endless possibility. Their story was a testament to the power of courage, trust, and human connection. It showed that even in the most unlikely circumstances, life could surprise, transform, and reward those willing to open their hearts, face their fears, and embrace the extraordinary journey of living fully, together.